and the house dog. A wolf met a dog, and seeing that he looked fat and sleek, said to him, "How does it happen, my friend, that you are so plump, while although I run after game, day and night, am half starved?" "Why," said the dog, "I do not have to run after my food. I only guard the house at night, and all the family pet me and feed me with scraps from their own plates. Come and live with me, and you shall be as well off as I am." "That I should like," said the wolf. "I will at least go with you and try the life." As they trotted along the road together, the wolf saw a mark on the dog's neck and asked him what it was. "Oh, that is nothing," said the dog, "only a little mark made by the fretting of my chain." "Do you wear a chain?" asked the wolf. "And do you mean to say that you are tied up?" "Why, yes," said the dog. "They tie me in the daytime, but at night I can go where I please. It is a bit annoying at first, but one soon gets used to it." "Goodbye, my friend," said the wolf. "That is enough for me. Though I may not be fat, I will at least be free." Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe my channel for more interesting and beautiful stories, and share our content with your friends. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a great fright. And then a little black animal. It was a dog, but she did not know it, for she had never seen one before. Came to the water and barked at her so furiously that she became frightened and rushed back to the open sea. But she said she should never forget the beautiful forest, the green hills, and the pretty children who could swim in the water although they had no tails. The fourth sister was more timid. She remained in the midst of the sea, but said it was quite as beautiful there as nearer the land. She could see many miles around her, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen the ships, but at such a great distance that they looked like seagulls. The dolphins sported in the waves, and the great whales spouted water from their nostrils till it seemed as if 100 fountains were playing in every direction. The fifth sister's birthday occurred in the winter, so when her turn came she saw what the others had not seen the first time they went up. The sea looked quite green, and large icebergs were floating about, each like a pearl, she said, but larger and loftier than the churches built by men. They were of the most singular shapes and glittered like diamonds. She had seated herself on one of the largest, and let the wind play with her long hair. She noticed that all the ships sailed past very rapidly, steering as far away as they could, as if they were afraid of the iceberg. Towards evening, as the sun went down, dark clouds covered the sky, the thunder rolled, and the flashes of lightning glowed red on the icebergs as they were tossed about by the heaving sea. On all the ships the sails were reefed with fear and trembling, while she sat on the floating iceberg, calmly watching the lightning as it darted its forked flashes into the sea. Each of the sisters, when first she had permission to rise to the surface, was delighted with the new and beautiful sights. Now that they were grown-up girls and could go when they pleased, they had become quite indifferent about it. They soon wished themselves back again, and after a month had passed they said it was much more beautiful down below and pleasanter to be at home. Yet often, in the evening hours, the 5 sisters would twine their arms about each other and rise to the surface together. Their voices were more charming than that of any human being. And before the approach of a storm, when they feared that a ship might be lost, they swam before the vessel, singing enchanting songs of the delights to be found in the depths of the sea and begging the voyagers not to fear if they sank to the bottom. But the sailors could not understand the song, and thought it was the sighing of the storm. These things were never beautiful to them. For if the ship sank, the men were drowned and their dead bodies alone reached the palace of the Sea King. When the sisters rose, arm in arm, through the water, their youngest sister would stand quite alone, looking after them, ready to cry. Only, since mermaids have no tears, she suffered more acutely. "Oh, were I but 15 years old," said she, "I know that I shall love the world up there, and all the people who live in it." At last she reached her 15th year. "Well, now you are grown up," said the old dowager, her grandmother. "Come, and let me adorn you like your sisters." And she placed in her hair a wreath of white lilies, of which every flower leaf was half a pearl. Then the old lady ordered 8 great oysters to attach themselves to the tail of the princess to show her high rank. "But they hurt me so," said the little mermaid. "Yes, I know. Pride must suffer pain," replied the old lady. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all this grandeur, and laid aside the heavy wreath. The red flowers in her own garden would have suited her much better. But she could not change herself, so she said farewell and rose as lightly as a bubble to the surface of the water. The sun had just set when she raised her head above the waves. The clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. The sea was calm, and the air mild and fresh. A large ship with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water. Only one sail was set, for not a breeze stirred. And the sailors sat idle on deck or amidst the rigging. There was music and song on board, and as darkness came on, 100 colored lanterns were lighted, as if the flags of all nations waved in the air. The little mermaid swam close to the cabin windows, and now and then, as the waves lifted her up, she could look in through glass window panes and see a number of gaily dressed people. Among them, and the most beautiful of all, was a young prince with large, black eyes. He was 16 years of age, and his birthday was being celebrated with great display. The sailors were dancing on deck, and when the prince came out of the cabin, more than 100 rockets rose in the air, making it as bright as day. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived underwater. And when she again stretched out her head, it looked as if all the stars of heaven were falling around her. She had never seen such fireworks before. Great suns spurted fire about. Splendid fireflies flew into the blue air. and everything was reflected in the clear, calm sea beneath. The ship itself was so brightly illuminated that all the people, and even the smallest rope, could be distinctly seen. How handsome the young prince looked, as he pressed the hands of all his guests and smiled at them, while the music resounded through the clear night air. It was very late, yet the little mermaid could not take her eyes from the ship or from the beautiful prince. The colored lanterns had been extinguished. No more rockets rose in the air, and the cannon had ceased firing. But the sea became restless, and a moaning, grumbling sound could be heard beneath the waves. Still the little mermaid remained by the cabin window, rocking up and down on the water, so that she could look within. After a while the sails were quickly set, and the ship went on her way. But soon the waves rose higher. Heavy clouds darkened the sky, and lightning appeared in the distance. A dreadful storm was approaching. Once more the sails were furled, and the great ship pursued her flying course over the raging sea. The waves rose mountain high, as if they would overtop the mast. But the ship dived like a swan between them, then rose again on their lofty, foaming crests. To the little mermaid this was pleasant sport, but not so to the sailors. At length the ship groaned and creaked. The thick planks gave way under the lashing of the sea. As the waves broke over the deck, the mainmast snapped asunder like a reed, and as the ship lay over on her side, the water rushed in. The little mermaid now perceived that the crew were in danger. Even she was obliged to be careful, to avoid the beams and planks of the wreck which lay scattered on the water. At one moment it was pitch dark so that she could not see a single object. But when a flash of lightning came, it revealed the whole scene. She could see every one who had been on board except the prince. When the ship parted, she had seen him sink into the deep waves, and she was glad, for she thought he would now be with her. Then she remembered that human beings could not live in the water, so that when he got down to her father's palace he would certainly be quite dead. No, he must not die. So she swam about among the beams and planks which strewed the surface of the sea, forgetting that they could crush her to pieces. Diving deep under the dark waters, rising and falling with the waves, she at length managed to reach the young prince, who was fast losing the power to swim in that stormy sea. His limbs were failing him, his beautiful eyes were closed, and he would have died had not the little mermaid come to his assistance. She held his head above the water, and let the waves carry them where they would. In the morning the storm had ceased, but of the ship not a single fragment could be seen. The sun came up red and shining out of the water, and its beams brought back the hue of health to the prince's cheeks. But his eyes remained closed. The mermaid kissed his high, smooth forehead and stroked back his wet hair. He seemed to her like the marble statue in her little garden. So she kissed him again and wished that he might live. Presently they came in sight of land, and she saw lofty blue mountains on which the white snow rested as if a flock of swans were lying upon them. Beautiful green forests were near the shore, and close by stood a large building. Whether a church or a convent she could not tell. Orange and citron trees grew in the garden, and before the door stood lofty palms. The sea here formed a little bay, in which the water lay quiet and still, but very deep. She swam with the handsome prince to the beach, which was covered with fine white sand, and there she laid him in the warm sunshine, taking care to raise his head higher than his body. Then bells sounded in the large white building, and some young girls came into the garden. The little mermaid swam out farther from the shore, and hid herself among some high rocks that rose out of the water, covering her head and neck with the foam of the sea. She watched there to see what would become of the poor prince. It was not long before she saw a young girl approach the spot where the prince lay. She seemed frightened at first, but only for a moment. Then she brought a number of people, and the mermaid saw that the prince came to life again and smiled upon those who stood about him. But to her he sent no smile. He knew not that she had saved him. This made her very sorrowful, and when he was led away into the great building, she dived down into the water and returned to her father's castle. She had always been silent and thoughtful, and now she was more so than ever. Her sisters asked her what she had seen during her first visit to the surface of the water, but she could tell them nothing. Many an evening and morning did she rise to the place where she had left the prince. She saw the fruits in the garden ripen and watched them gathered. She watched the snow on the mountain tops melt away, but never did she see the prince, and therefore she always returned home more sorrowful than before. It was her only comfort to sit in her own little garden and fling her arm around the beautiful marble statue, which was like the prince. She gave up tending her flowers, and they grew in wild confusion over the paths, twining their long leaves and stems round the branches of the trees so that the whole place became dark and gloomy. At length she could bear it no longer, and told one of her sisters all about it. Then the others heard the secret, and very soon it became known to several mermaids, one of whom had an intimate friend who happened to know about the prince. She had also seen the festival on board ship, and she told them where the prince came from and where his palace stood. Come, little sister, said the other princesses. Then they entwined their arms and rose together to the surface of the water, near the spot where they knew the prince's palace stood. It was built of bright yellow, shining stone, and had long flights of marble steps, one of which reached quite down to the sea. Splendid gilded cupolas rose over the roof, and between the pillars that surrounded the whole building stood lifelike statues of marble. Through the clear crystal of the lofty windows could be seen noble rooms,
with costly silk curtains and hangings of tapestry, and walls covered with beautiful paintings. In the center of the largest salon, a fountain threw its sparkling jets high up into the glass cupola of the ceiling, through which the sun shone in upon the water and upon the beautiful plants that grew in the basin of the fountain. Now that the little mermaid knew where the prince lived, she spent many an evening and many a night on the water near the palace. She would swim much nearer the shore than any of the others had ventured. And once she went up the narrow channel under the marble balcony, which threw a broad shadow on the water. Here she sat and watched the young prince, who thought himself alone in the bright moonlight. She often saw him evenings, sailing in a beautiful boat on which music sounded and flags waved. She peeped out from among the green rushes, and if the wind caught her long silvery white veil, those who saw it believed it to be a swan, spreading out its wings. Many a night, too, when the fishermen set their nets by the light of their torches, she heard them relate many good things about the young prince. And this made her glad that she had saved his life when he was tossed about half dead on the waves. She remembered how his head had rested on her bosom and how heartily she had kissed him. But he knew nothing of all this and could not even dream of her. She grew more and more to like human beings, and wished more and more to be able to wander about with those whose world seemed to be so much larger than her own. They could fly over the sea in ships and mount the high hills which were far above the clouds, and the lands they possessed, their woods and their fields, stretched far away beyond the reach of her sight. There was so much that she wished to know, but her sisters were unable to answer all her questions. She then went to her old grandmother, who knew all about the upper world, which she rightly called the lands above the sea. "If human beings are not drowned," asked the little mermaid, "can they live forever? Do they never die, as we do here in the sea?" "Yes," replied the old lady, "they must also die, and their term of life is even shorter than ours. We sometimes live for 300 years. But when we cease to exist here, we become only foam on the surface of the water, and have not even a grave among those we love. We have not immortal souls, we shall never live again. Like the green seaweed, when once it has been cut off, we can never flourish more. Human beings, on the contrary, have souls which live forever, even after the body has been turned to dust. They rise up through the clear, pure air, beyond the glittering stars, as we rise out of the water and behold all the land of the earth. So do they rise to unknown and glorious regions which we shall never see. Why have not we immortal souls?" asked the little mermaid mournfully. "I would gladly give all the hundreds of years that I have to live, to be a human being only for one day, and to have the hope of knowing the happiness of that glorious world above the stars." "You must not think that," said the old woman. "We believe that we are much happier and much better off than human beings." "So I shall die," said the little mermaid, and as the foam of the sea I shall be driven about, never again to hear the music of the waves or to see the pretty flowers or the red sun? Is there anything I can do to win an immortal soul?" "No," said the old woman, "unless a man should love you so much that you were more to him than his father or his mother, and if all his thoughts and all his love were fixed upon you." And the priest placed his right hand in yours, and he promised to be true to you here and hereafter. Then his soul would glide into your body, and you would obtain a share in the future happiness of mankind. He would give to you a soul and retain his own as well. But this can never happen. Your fish's tail, which among us is considered so beautiful, on earth is thought to be quite ugly. They do not know any better, and they think it necessary, in order to be handsome, to have two stout props, which they call legs. Then the little mermaid sighed and looked sorrowfully at her fish's tail. "Let us be happy," said the old lady, "and dart and spring about during the 300 years that we have to live, which is really quite long enough. After that we can rest ourselves all the better. This evening we are going to have a court ball." It was one of those splendid sights which we can never see on earth. The walls and the ceiling of the large ballroom were of thick but transparent crystal. Many hundreds of colossal shells, some of a deep red, others of a grass green, with blue fire in them, stood in rows on each side. These lighted up the whole salon, and shone through the walls so that the sea was also illuminated. Innumerable fishes, great and small, swam past the crystal walls. On some of them the scales glowed with a purple brilliance, and on others shone like silver and gold. Through the halls flowed a broad stream, and in it danced the mermen and the mermaids to the music of their own sweet singing. No one on earth has such lovely voices as they, but the little mermaids sang more sweetly than all. The whole court applauded her with hands and tails, and for a moment her heart felt quite gay, for she knew she had the sweetest voice either on earth or in the sea. But soon she thought again of the world above her. She could not forget the charming prince, nor her sorrow that she had not an immortal soul like his. She crept away silently out of her father's palace, and while everything within was gladness and song, she sat in her own little garden, sorrowful and alone. Then she heard the bugle sounding through the water and thought, "He is certainly sailing above. He in whom my wishes center and in whose hands I should like to place the happiness of my life. I will venture all for him and to win an immortal soul. While my sisters are dancing in my father's palace, I will go to the sea witch, of whom I have always been so much afraid. She can give me counsel and help." Then the little mermaid went out from her garden and took the road to the foaming whirlpools, behind which the sorceress lived. She had never been that way before. Neither flowers nor grass grew there. Nothing but bare, gray, sandy ground stretched out to the whirlpool, where the water, like foaming mill wheels, seized everything that came within its reach and cast it into the fathomless deep. Through the midst of these crushing whirlpools the little mermaid was obliged to pass before she could reach the dominions of the sea witch. Then, for a long distance, the road lay across a stretch of warm, bubbling mire, called by the witch her turf moor. Beyond this was the witch's house, which stood in the center of a strange forest, where all the trees and flowers were polypi, half animals and half plants. They looked like serpents with 100 heads, growing out of the ground. The branches were long, slimy arms, with fingers like flexible worms, moving limb after limb from the root to the top. All that could be reached in the sea they seized upon and held fast, so that it never escaped from their clutches. The little mermaid was so alarmed at what she saw that she stood still and her heart beat with fear. She came very near turning back. But she thought of the prince and of the human soul for which she longed, and her courage returned. She fastened her long, flowing hair round her head, so that the polypi should not lay hold of it. She crossed her hands on her bosom, and then darted forward as a fish shoots through the water. Between the supple arms and fingers of the ugly polypi, which were stretched out on each side of her, she saw that they all held in their grasp something they had seized with their numerous little arms, which were as strong as iron bands. Tightly grasped in their clinging arms were white skeletons of human beings who had perished at sea and had sunk down into the deep waters. Skeletons of land animals, and oars, rudders, and chests of ships. There was even a little mermaid whom they had caught and strangled. And this seemed the most shocking of all to the little princess. She now came to a space of marshy ground in the wood, where large, fat water snakes were rolling in the mire and showing their ugly, drab-colored bodies. In the midst of this spot stood a house, built of the bones of shipwrecked human beings. There sat the sea witch, allowing a toad to eat from her mouth just as people sometimes feed a canary with pieces of sugar. She called the ugly water snakes her little chickens and allowed them to crawl all over her bosom. "I know what you want," said the sea witch. "It is very stupid of you, but you shall have your way, though it will bring you to sorrow, my pretty princess. You want to get rid of your fish's tail and to have two supports instead, like human beings on earth, so that the young prince may fall in love with you and so that you may have an immortal soul." And then the witch laughed so loud and so disgustingly that the toad and the snakes fell to the ground and lay there wriggling. "You are but just in time," said the witch, "for after sunrise tomorrow I should not be able to help you till the end of another year. I will prepare a draught for you, with which you must swim to land tomorrow before sunrise. Seat yourself there and drink it. Your tail will then disappear, and shrink up into what men call legs. You will feel great pain, as if a sword were passing through you. But all who see you will say that you are the prettiest little human being they ever saw. You will still have the same floating gracefulness of movement, and no dancer will ever tread so lightly." Every step you take, however, will be as if you were treading upon sharp knives and as if the blood must flow. If you will bear all this, I will help you. Yes, I will, said the little princess in a trembling voice, as she thought of the prince and the immortal soul. But think again, said the witch, for when once your shape has become like a human being, you can no more be a mermaid. You will never return through the water to your sisters or to your father's palace again. And if you do not win the love of the prince, so that he is willing to forget his father and mother for your sake, and to love you with his whole soul, and allow the priest to join your hands that you may be man and wife, then you will never have an immortal soul. The first morning after he marries another, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the crest of the waves. I will do it, said the little mermaid, and she became pale as death. But I must be paid also, said the witch, and it is not a trifle that I ask. You have the sweetest voice of any who dwell here in the depths of the sea, and you believe that you will be able to charm the prince with it. But this voice you must give to me. The best thing you possess will I have as the price of my costly draft, which must be mixed with my own blood, so that it may be as sharp as a two-edged sword. But if you take away my voice, said the little mermaid, what is left for me? Your beautiful form, your graceful walk, and your expressive eyes. Surely with these you can enchain a man's heart. Well, have you lost your courage? Put out your little tongue, that I may cut it off as my payment. Then you shall have the powerful draft. It shall be, said the little mermaid. Then the witch placed her cauldron on the fire to prepare the magic draft. Cleanliness is a good thing, said she, scouring the vessel with snakes which she had tied together in a large knot. Then she pricked herself in the breast, and let the black blood drop into the cauldron. The steam that rose twisted itself into such horrible shapes that no one could look at them without fear. Every moment the witch threw a new ingredient into the vessel. And when it began to boil, the sound was like the weeping of a crocodile. When at last the magic draft was ready, it looked like the clearest water. There it is for you, said the witch. Then she cut off the mermaid's tongue, so that she would never again speak or sing. If the polypi should seize you as you return through the wood, said the witch, throw over them a few drops of the potion, and their fingers will be torn into 1,000 pieces. But the little mermaid had no occasion to do this, for the polypi sprang back in terror when they caught sight of the glittering draft, which shone in her hand like a twinkling star. So she passed quickly through the wood and the marsh and between the rushing whirlpools. She saw that in her father's palace the torches in the ballroom were extinguished, and that all within were asleep. But she did not venture to go into them, for now that she was down and going to leave them forever, she felt as if her heart would break. She stole into the garden, took a flower from the flower bed of each of her sisters, kissed her hand towards the palace 1,000 times, and then rose up through the dark blue waters. The sun had not risen when she came in sight of the prince's palace and approached the beautiful marble steps, but the moon shone clear and bright. Then the little mermaid drank the magic draught, and it seemed as if a two-edged sword went through her delicate body. She fell into a swoon and lay like one dead. When the sun rose and shone over the sea, she recovered and felt a sharp pain, but before her stood the handsome young prince. He fixed his cold black eyes upon her, so earnestly that she cast down her own, and then became aware that her fish's tail was gone, and that she had as pretty a pair of white legs, and tiny feet as any little maiden could have. But she had no clothes, so she wrapped herself in her long, thick hair. The prince asked her who she was and whence she came. She looked at him mildly and sorrowfully with her deep blue eyes, but could not speak. He took her by the hand and led her to the palace. Before her stood the handsome young prince. Every step she took was as the witch had said it would be. She felt as if she were treading upon the points of needles or sharp knives. She bore it willingly, however, and moved at the prince's side as lightly as a bubble, so that he and all who saw her wondered at her graceful, swaying movements. She was very soon arrayed in costly robes of silk and muslin, and was the most beautiful creature in the palace. But she was dumb and could neither speak nor sing. Beautiful female slaves, dressed in silk and gold, stepped forward and sang before the prince and his royal parents. One sang better than all the others. And the prince clapped his hands and smiled at her. This was a great sorrow to the little mermaid, for she knew how much more sweetly she herself once could sing, and she thought, "Oh, if he could only know that I have given away my voice forever to be with him." The slaves next performed some pretty fairy-like dances to the sound of beautiful music. Then the little mermaid raised her lovely white arms, stood on the tips of her toes, glided over the floor, and danced as no one yet had been able to dance. At each moment her beauty was more revealed, and her expressive eyes appealed more directly to the heart than the songs of the slaves. Everyone was enchanted, especially the prince, who called her his little foundling. She danced again quite readily, to please him, though each time her foot touched the floor it seemed as if she trod on sharp knives. The prince said she should remain with him always, and she was given permission to sleep at his door, on a velvet cushion. He had a page's dress made for her, that she might accompany him on horseback. They rode together through the sweet-scented woods, where the green boughs touched their shoulders, and the little birds sang among the fresh leaves. She climbed with him to the tops of high mountains, and although her tender feet bled so that even her steps were marked, she only smiled, and followed him till they could see the clouds beneath them like a flock of birds flying to distant lands. While at the prince's palace, and when all the household were asleep, she would go and sit on the broad marble steps, for it eased her burning feet to bathe them in the cold sea water. It was then that she thought of all those below and deep. Once during the night her sisters came up arm in arm, singing sorrowfully as they floated on the water. She beckoned to them, and they recognized her and told her how she had grieved them. After that, they came to the same place every night. Once she saw in the distance her old grandmother, who had not been to the surface of the sea for many years, and the old sea king, her father, with his crown on his head. They stretched out their hands towards her, but did not venture so near the land as her sisters had. As the days passed, she loved the prince more dearly, and he loved her as one would love a little child. The thought never came to him to make her his wife. Yet unless he married her, she could not receive an immortal soul. And on the morning after his marriage with another, she would dissolve into the foam of the sea. Do you not love me the best of them all? The eyes of the little mermaid seemed to say when he took her in his arms and kissed her fair forehead. Yes, you are dear to me, said the prince, for you have the best heart, and you are the most devoted to me. You are like a young maiden whom I once saw, but whom I shall never meet again. I was in a ship that was wrecked, and the waves cast me ashore near a holy temple where several young maidens performed the service. The youngest of them found me on the shore and saved my life. I saw her but twice, and she is the only one in the world whom I could love. But you are like her, and you have almost driven her image from my mind. She belongs to the holy temple, and good fortune has sent you to me in her stead. We will never part. He knows not that it was I who saved his life, thought the little mermaid. I carried him over the sea to the wood where the temple stands. I sat beneath the foam and watched till the human beings came to help him. I saw the pretty maiden that he loves better than he loves me. The mermaid sighed deeply, but she could not weep. He says the maiden belongs to the holy temple, therefore she will never return to the world. They will meet no more. I am by his side and see him every day. I will take care of him, and love him, and give up my life for his sake. Very soon it was said that the prince was to marry, and that the beautiful daughter of a neighboring king would be his wife, for a fine ship was being fitted out. Although the prince gave out that he intended merely to pay a visit to the king, it was generally supposed that he went to court the princess. A great company were to go with him. The little mermaid smiled and shook her head. She knew the prince's thoughts better than any of the others. I must travel, he had said to her. I must see this beautiful princess. My parents desire it, but they will not oblige me to bring her home as my bride. I cannot love her, because she is not like the beautiful maiden in the temple, whom you resemble. If I were forced to choose a bride, I would choose you, my dumb foundling, with those expressive eyes. Then he kissed her rosy mouth, played with her long, waving hair, and laid his head on her heart, while she dreamed of human happiness and an immortal soul. You are not afraid of the sea, my dumb child, are you? He said, as they stood on the deck of the noble ship which was to carry them to the country of the neighboring king. Then he told her of storm and of calm, of strange fishes in the deep beneath them, and of what the divers had seen there. She smiled at his descriptions, for she knew better than anyone what wonders were at the bottom of the sea. In the moonlight night, when all on board were asleep except the man at the helm, she sat on deck, gazing down through the clear water. She thought she could distinguish her father's castle, and upon it her aged grandmother, with the silver crown on her head, looking through the rushing tide at the keel of the vessel. Then her sisters came up on the waves and gazed at her mournfully, wringing their white hands. She beckoned to them, and smiled, and wanted to tell them how happy and well off she was. But the cabin boy approached, and when her sisters dived down, he thought what he saw was only the foam of the sea. The next morning the ship sailed into the harbor of a beautiful town, belonging to the king whom the prince was going to visit. The church bells were ringing, and from the high towers sounded a flourish of trumpets. Soldiers, with flying colors and glittering bayonets, lined the roads through which they passed. Every day was a festival, balls and entertainments following one another, but the princess had not yet appeared. People said that she had been brought up and educated in a religious house, where she was learning every royal virtue. At last she came. Then the little mermaid, who was anxious to see whether she was really beautiful, was obliged to admit that she had never seen a more perfect vision of beauty. Her skin was delicately fair, and beneath her long, dark eyelashes her laughing blue eyes shone with truth and purity. "It was you," said the prince, "who saved my life when I lay as if dead on the beach." And he folded his blushing bride in his arms. "Oh, I am too happy," said he to the little mermaid. "My fondest hopes are now fulfilled. You will rejoice at my happiness, for your devotion to me is great and sincere." The little mermaid kissed his hand and felt as if her heart were already broken. His wedding morning would bring death to her, and she would change into the foam of the sea. All the church bells rang, and the heralds rode through the town proclaiming the betrothal. Perfumed oil was burned in costly silver lamps on every altar. The priest waved the censers, while the bride and the bridegroom joined their hands and received the blessing of the bishop. The little mermaid, dressed in silk and gold, held up the bride's train, but her ears heard nothing of the festive music, and her eyes saw not the holy ceremony. She thought of the night of death which was coming to her, and of all she had lost in the world. On the same evening the bride and bridegroom went on board the ship. Cannons were roaring, flags waving, and in the center of the ship a costly tent of purple and gold had been erected. It contained elegant sleeping couches for the bridal pair during the night. The ship, under a favorable wind, with swelling sails, glided away smoothly and lightly over the calm sea. When it grew dark, a number of colored lamps were lighted and the sailors danced merrily on the deck. The little mermaid could not help thinking of her first rising out of the sea. when she had seen similar joyful festivities, so she too joined in the dance, poised herself in the air as a swallow when he pursues his prey, and all present cheered her wonderingly. She had never danced so gracefully before. Her tender feet felt as if cut with sharp knives, but she cared not for the pain. A sharper pang had pierced her heart. She knew this was the last evening she should ever see the prince, for whom she had forsaken her kindred and her home. She had given up her beautiful voice and suffered unheard of pain daily for him, while he knew nothing of it. This was the last evening that she should breathe the same air with him or gaze on the starry sky and the deep sea. An eternal night, without a thought or a dream, awaited her. She had no soul, and now could never win one. All was joy and gaiety on the ship until long after midnight. She smiled and danced with the rest, while the thought of death was in her heart. The prince kissed his beautiful bride, and she played with his raven hair till they went arm in arm to rest in the sumptuous tent. Then all became still on board the ship, and only the pilot, who stood at the helm, was awake. The little mermaid leaned her white arms on the edge of the vessel and looked towards the east for the first blush of morning. For that first ray of the dawn which was to be her death. She saw her sisters rising out of the flood. They were as pale as she, but their beautiful hair no longer waved in the wind. It had been cut off. "We have given our hair to the witch," said they, "to obtain help for you, that you may not die tonight. She has given us a knife. See, it is very sharp. Before the sun rises, you must plunge it into the heart of the prince. When the warm blood falls upon your feet, they will grow together again into a fish's tail. And you will once more be a mermaid, and can return to us to live out your 300 years, before you are changed into the salt sea foam. Haste then, either he or you must die before sunrise. Our old grandmother mourns so for you that her white hair is falling, as ours fell under the witch's scissors. Kill the prince and come back. Hasten! Do you not see the first red streaks in the sky? In a few minutes the sun will rise, and you must die." Then they sighed deeply and mournfully, and sank beneath the waves. The little mermaid drew back the crimson curtain of the tent, and beheld the fair bride, whose head was resting on the prince's breast. She bent down and kissed his noble brow, then looked at the sky, on which the rosy dawn grew brighter and brighter. She glanced at the sharp knife and again fixed her eyes on the prince, who whispered the name of his bride in his dreams. She was in his thoughts, and the knife trembled in the hand of the little mermaid. But she flung it far from her into the waves. The water turned red where it fell, and the drops that spurted up looked like blood. She cast one more lingering, half-fainting glance at the prince, then threw herself from the ship into the sea and felt her body dissolving into foam. The sun rose above the waves, and his warm rays fell on the cold foam of the little mermaid, who did not feel as if she were dying. She saw the bright sun and hundreds of transparent, beautiful creatures floating around her. She could see through them the white sails of the ships and the red clouds in the sky. Their speech was melodious, but could not be heard by mortal ears, just as their bodies could not be seen by mortal eyes. The little mermaid perceived that she had a body like theirs and that she continued to rise higher and higher out of the foam. "Where am I?" asked she, and her voice sounded ethereal, like the voices of those who were with her. No earthly music could imitate it. "Among the daughters of the air," answered one of them. "A mermaid has not an immortal soul, nor can she obtain one unless she wins the love of a human being. On the will of another hangs her eternal destiny. But the daughters of the air, although they do not possess an immortal soul, can, by their good deeds, procure one for themselves. We fly to warm countries and cool the sultry air that destroys mankind with the pestilence. We carry the perfume of the flowers to spread health and restoration. After we have striven for 300 years to do all the good in our power, we receive an immortal soul and take part in the happiness of mankind. You, poor little mermaid, have tried with your whole heart to do as we are doing. You have suffered and endured, and raised yourself to the spirit world by your good deeds. And now, by striving for 300 years in the same way, you may obtain an immortal soul." The little mermaid lifted her glorified eyes toward the sun and, for the first time, felt them filling with tears. On the ship in which she had left the prince there were life and noise, and she saw him and his beautiful bride searching for her. Sorrowfully they gazed at the pearly foam, as if they knew she had thrown herself into the waves. Unseen she kissed the forehead of the bride and fanned the prince, and then mounted with the other children of the air to a rosy cloud that floated above. "After 300 years, thus shall we float into the kingdom of heaven," said she. "And we may even get there sooner," whispered one of her companions. "Unseen we can enter the houses of men where there are children. And for every day on which we find a good child that is the joy of his parents and deserves their love, our time of probation is shortened." The child does not know, when we fly through the room, that we smile with joy at his good conduct, for we can count 1 year less of our 300 years. But when we see a naughty or a wicked child we shed tears of sorrow, and for every tear a day is added to our time of trial. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe for more interesting and beautiful stories and share our content with your friends.
The Happy Hunter and the Skillful Fisher. A long, long time ago, in Japan, there was a very strong and courageous ruler, and he was famous for being the greatest hunter in the country. Because of his matchless skill as a hunter, he was called Yama-Sachi Hiko, or the Happy Hunter of the Mountains. His elder brother was a very skillful fisher, and as he far surpassed all rivals in fishing, he was named Umisaki Hiko, or the skillful fisher of the sea. The brothers thus led happy lives, thoroughly enjoying their respective occupations. And the days passed quickly and pleasantly while each pursued his own way, the one hunting and the other fishing. One day Yamasakihiko came to his brother, Yumisakihiko, and said,
"Well, my brother, I see you go to the sea every day with your fishing rod in your hand, and when you return you come laden with fish. And as for me, it is my pleasure to take my bow and arrow and to hunt the wild animals up the mountains and down in the valleys. For a long time we have each followed our favorite occupation, so that now we must both be tired, you of your fishing, and I of my hunting. Would it not be wise for us to make a change? Will you try hunting in the mountains, and I will go and fish in the sea?"
Yumisakihiko listened in silence to his brother, and for a moment was thoughtful, but at last he answered,
"Oh, yes. Why not? Your idea is not a bad one at all. Give me your bow and arrow, and I will set out at once for the mountains and hunt for game."
So the matter was settled by this talk, and the two brothers each started out to try the other's occupation, little dreaming of all that would happen. It was very unwise of them, for Yamasakihiko knew nothing of fishing, and Yumisakihiko, who was bad-tempered, knew as much about hunting. Yamasakihiko took his brother's much-prized fishing hook and rod and went down to the seashore and sat down on the rocks. He baited his hook and then threw it into the sea clumsily. He sat and gazed at the little float, bobbing up and down in the water, and longed for a good fish to come and be caught. Every time the buoy moved a little, he pulled up his rod. But there was never a fish at the end of it, only the hook and the bait. If he had known how to fish properly, he would have been able to catch plenty of fish. But although he was the greatest hunter in the land, he could not help being the most bungling fisher. The whole day passed in this way, while he sat on the rocks, holding the fishing rod, and waiting in vain for his luck to turn. At last the day began to darken, and the evening came. Still he had caught not a single fish. Drawing up his line for the last time before going home, he found that he had lost his hook, without even knowing when he had dropped it. He now began to feel extremely anxious, for he knew that his brother would be angry at his having lost his hook, for, it being his only one, he valued it above all other things. Yamasakihiko now set to work to look among the rocks and on the sand for the lost hook. And while he was searching to and fro, his brother, Yumisakihiko, arrived on the scene. He had failed to find any game while hunting that day, and was not only in a bad temper, but looked fearfully cross. When he saw Yamasakihiko searching about on the shore, he knew that something must have gone wrong, so he said at once,
"What are you doing, my brother?"
Yamasakihiko went forward, timidly, for he feared his brother's anger, and said,
"Oh, my brother, I have indeed done badly."
"What is the matter? What have you done?"
asked the elder brother impatiently.
"I have lost your precious fishing hook."
While he was still speaking, his brother stopped him and cried out fiercely,
"Lost my hook! It is just what I expected. For this reason, when you first proposed your plan of changing over our occupations, I was really against it. but you seemed to wish it so much that I gave in and allowed you to do as you wished. The mistake of our trying unfamiliar tasks is soon seen, and you have done badly. I will not return you your bow and arrow till you have found my hook. Look to it that you find it and return it to me quickly.
Yamasakihiko felt that he was to blame for all that had come to pass, and bore his brother's scornful scolding with humility and patience. He hunted everywhere for the hook most diligently, but it was nowhere to be found. He was at last obliged to give up all hope of finding it. He then went home, and in desperation broke his beloved sword into pieces, and made 500 hooks out of it. He took these to his angry brother and offered them to him, asking his forgiveness, and begging him to accept them in the place of the one he had lost for him. It was useless. His brother would not listen to him, much less grant his request. Yamasakihiko then made another 500 hooks, and again took them to his brother, beseeching him to pardon him.
Though you make 1,000,000 hooks,
said Yamasakihiko, shaking his head,
they are of no use to me. I cannot forgive you unless you bring me back my own hook.
Nothing would appease the anger of Yamasakihiko, for he had a bad disposition, and had always hated his brother because of his virtues. And now, with the excuse of the lost fishing hook, he planned to kill him and to usurp his place as ruler of Japan. Yamasakihiko knew all this full well, but he could say nothing. For being the younger, he owed his elder brother obedience. So he returned to the seashore and once more began to look for the missing hook. He was much cast down, for he had lost all hope of ever finding his brother's hook now. While he stood on the beach, lost in perplexity and wondering what he had best do next, an old man suddenly appeared carrying a stick in his hand. Yamasakihiko afterwards remembered that he did not see from whence the old man came, neither did he know how he was there. He happened to look up and saw the old man coming towards him.
You are holding me, your augustness, sometimes called the happy hunter, are you not?
Asked the old man.
What are you doing alone in such a place?
Yes, I am he,
answered the unhappy young man.
Unfortunately, while fishing, I lost my brother's precious fishing hook. I have hunted this shore all over, but alas, cannot find it, and I am very troubled. For my brother won't forgive me. Chiwa started to him. But who are you?
My name is Shiwokino, and I live nearby the shore. I am sorry to hear what misfortune has befallen you. You must indeed be anxious. But if I tell you what I think, the hook is nowhere here. It is either at the bottom of the sea or in the body of some fish who has swallowed it. And for this reason, though you spend your whole life looking for it here, you will never find it.
Then what can I do?
Asked the distressed man.
You had better go down to Ringu and tell Rinjin, the dragon king of the sea, what your trouble is, and ask him to find the hook for you. I think that would be the best way.
Your idea is a splendid one,
said Yamasakihiko.
But I fear I cannot get to the Sea King's realm, for I have always heard that it is situated at the bottom of the sea.
Oh, there will be no difficulty about your getting there,
said the old man.
I can soon make something for you to ride on through the sea.
Thank you,
said Yamasachiko.
I shall be very grateful to you, if you will be so kind.
The old man at once set to work, and soon made a basket, and offered it to Yamasachiko. He received it with joy, and taking it to the water, mounted it, and prepared to start. He bade goodbye to the kind old man who had helped him so much, and told him that he would certainly reward him as soon as he found his hook, and could return to Japan without fear of his brother's anger. The old man pointed out the direction he must take, and told him how to reach the realm of Ringu, and watched him ride out to sea on the basket, which resembled a small boat. Yamasachiko made all the haste he could, riding on the basket which had been given him by his friend. His queer boat seemed to go through the water of its own accord, and the distance was much shorter than he had expected, for in a few hours he caught sight of the gate and the roof of the sea king's palace. And what a large place it was, with its numberless sloping roofs and gables, its huge gateways, and its gray stone walls. He soon landed, and leaving his basket on the beach, he walked up to the large gateway. The pillars of the gate were made of beautiful red coral, and the gate itself was adorned with glittering gems of all kinds. Large katsura trees overshadowed it. Our hero had often heard of the wonders of the Sea King's palace beneath the sea, but all the stories he had ever heard fell short of the reality which he now saw for the first time. Yamasachiko would have liked to enter the gate there, but he saw that it was fast closed, and also that there was no one about whom he could ask to open it for him. So he stopped to think what he should do. In the shade of the trees before the gate, he noticed a well full of fresh spring water. Surely, someone would come out to draw water from the well sometime, he thought. Then he climbed into the tree, overhanging the well, and seated himself to rest on one of the branches, and waited for what might happen. Ere long, he saw the huge gate swing open, and two beautiful women came out. Now the Mikoto, Augustness, had always heard that Ringu was the realm of the dragon, king under the sea, and had naturally supposed that the place was inhabited by dragons and similar terrible creatures. So that when he saw these two lovely princesses, whose beauty would be rare even in the world from which he had just come, he was exceedingly surprised, and wondered what it could mean. He said not a word, however, but silently gazed at them through the foliage of the trees, waiting to see what they would do. He saw that in their hands they carried golden buckets. Slowly and gracefully in their trailing garments, they approached the well, standing in the shade of the katsura trees, and were about to draw water, all unknowing of the stranger who was watching them. For Yamasachiko was quite hidden among the branches of the tree, where he had posted himself, as the two ladies leaned over the side of the well to let down their golden buckets, which they did every day in the year. They saw reflected in the deep still water the face of a handsome youth, gazing at them from amidst the branches of the tree, in whose shade they stood. Never before had they seen the face of mortal man. They were frightened, and drew back quickly with their golden buckets in their hands. Their curiosity, however, soon gave them courage, and they glanced timidly upwards to see the cause of the unusual reflection. And then they beheld Yamasachiko sitting in the tree, looking down at them with surprise and admiration. They gazed at him face to face, but their tongues were still with wonder, and could not find a word to say to him. When the Mikoto saw that he was discovered, he sprang down lightly from the tree and said,
I am a traveler, and as I was very thirsty, I came to the well in the hopes of quenching my thirst. But if I could find a bucket with which to draw the water. So I climbed into the tree, much vexed, and waited for someone to come. Just at that moment, while I was thirstily and impatiently waiting, you noble ladies appeared, as if in answer to my great need. Therefore, I pray you of your mercy, give me some water to drink, for I am a thirsty traveler in a strange land.
His dignity and graciousness overruled their timidity, and bowing in silence, they both once more approached the well, and letting down their golden buckets, drew up some water, and poured it into a jeweled cup, and offered it to the stranger. He received it from them with both hands, raising it to the height of his forehead, in token of high respect and pleasure, and then drank the water quickly. For his thirst was great. When he had finished his long draught, he set the cup down on the edge of the well, and drawing his short sword, he cut off one of the strange curved jewels, Magatama, a necklace which hung round his neck and fell over his breast. He placed the jewel in the cup and returned it to them and said, bowing deeply,
This is a token of my thanks.
The two ladies took the cup, and looking into it, to see what he had put inside, for they did not yet know what it was. They gave a start of surprise, for there lay a beautiful gem at the bottom of the cup.
No ordinary mortal would give away a jewel so freely. Will you not honor us by telling us who you are?
Said the elder damsel.
Certainly,
Said Yamasakiko.
I am Hodemi, the fourth Mikoto, also called in Japan Yamazashi Hiku.
Are you indeed Hodemi, the grandson of Amaterasu, the sun goddess?
Asked the damsel who had spoken first.
I am the eldest daughter of Rinjin, the king of the sea, and my name is Princess Tayotama.
And?
Said the younger maiden, who at last found her tongue.
I am her sister, the Princess Tamayori.
Are you indeed the daughters of Rinjin, the king of the sea? I cannot tell you how glad I am to meet you.
Said Yamasakiko, and without waiting for them to reply, he went on.
The other day, I went fishing with my brother's hook, and dropped it. How? I am sure I can't tell, as my brother prizes his fishing hook above all his other possessions. This is the greatest calamity that could have befallen me. Unless I find it again, I can never hope to win my brother's forgiveness. For he is very angry at what I have done. I have searched for it many times, but I cannot find it. Therefore I am much troubled. While I was hunting for the hook, in great distress, I met a wise old man, and he told me that the best thing I could do was to come to Ringu and to Rinjin, the dragon king of the sea, and ask him to help me. This kind of man also showed me how to come. Now you know how it is I am here and why. I want to ask Rinjin if he knows where the lost hook is. Will you be so kind as to take me to your father? And do you think he will see me?
Asked Yamasakiko anxiously. Princess Tayotama listened to this long story and then said,
Not only is it easy for you to see my father, but he will be much pleased to meet you. I am sure he will say that good fortune has befallen him that so great and noble a man as you, the grandson of Amaterasu, should come down to the bottom of the sea.
And then turning to her younger sister, she said,
Do you not think so, Tamayori?
Yes, indeed,
answered the Princess Tamayori in her sweet voice.
As you say, we can know no greater honor than to welcome the Mikoto to our home.
Then I ask you to be so kind as to lead the way,
said Yamasashi Hiko.
Condescend to enter Mikoto's goodness,
said both the sisters, and bowing low, they led him through the gate. The younger princess left her sister to take charge of Yamasashi Hiko, and going faster than they, she reached the Sea King's palace first, and running quickly to her father's room, she told him of all that had happened to them at the gate, and that her sister was even now bringing the augustness to him. The Dragon King of the Sea was much surprised at the news, for it was but seldom, perhaps only once in several hundred years, that the Sea King's palace was visited by mortals. Rinjin at once clapped his hands and summoned all his courtiers and the servants of the palace, and the chief fish of the sea together, and solemnly told them that the grandson of the sun goddess, Amaterasu, was coming to the palace, and that they must be very ceremonious and polite in serving the august visitor. He then ordered them all to the entrance of the palace to welcome Yamasashi Hiko. Rinjin then dressed himself in his robes of ceremony and went out to welcome him. In a few moments, the Princess Tayotama and Yamasashi Hiko reached the entrance, and the Sea King and his wife bowed to the ground and thanked him for the honor he did them in coming to see them. The Sea King then led Yamasashi Hiko to the guest room, and placing him in the uppermost seat, he bowed respectfully before him and said,
I am Rinjin, the Dragon King of the Sea, and this is my wife. Condescend to remember us forever.
Are you indeed Rinjin, the King of the Sea, of whom I have so often heard?
Answered Yamasashi Hiko, saluting his host most ceremoniously.
I must apologize for all the trouble I am giving you by my unexpected visit.
And he bowed again and thanked the Sea King.
You need not thank me,
said Rinjin.
It is I who must thank you for coming. Although the Sea Palace is a poor place, as you see, I shall be highly honored if you will make us a long visit.
There was much gladness between the Sea King and Yamasashi Hiko, and they sat and talked for a long time. At last the Sea King clapped his hands, and then a huge retinue of fishes appeared, all robed in ceremonial garments, and bearing in their fins various trays on, which all kinds of sea delicacies were served. A great feast was now spread before the king and his royal guest. All the fishes in waiting were chosen from amongst the finest fish in the sea. So you can imagine what a wonderful array of sea creatures it was that waited upon Yamasashi Hiko that day. All in the palace tried to do their best to please him, and to show him that he was a much-honored guest. During the long repast which lasted for hours, Rinjin commanded his daughters to play some music, and the two princesses came in and performed on the koto, the Japanese harp, and sang and danced in turns. The time passed so pleasantly that Yamasashi Hiko seemed to forget his trouble and why he had come at all to the Sea King's realm, and he gave himself up to the enjoyment of this wonderful place, the land of fairy fishes. Who has ever heard of such a marvelous place? But the Mikoto soon remembered what had brought him to Ringu, and said to his host,
Perhaps your daughters have told you, King Rinjin, that I have come here to try and recover my brother's fishing hook, which I lost while fishing the other day. May I ask you to be so kind as to inquire of all your subjects, if any of them have seen a fishing hook lost in the sea?
Certainly,
said the obliging Sea King.
I will immediately summon them all here and ask them.
As soon as he had issued his command, the octopus, the cuttlefish, the bonito, the oxtail fish, the eel, the jellyfish, the shrimp, and the plaice, and many other fishes of all kinds came in and sat down before Rinjin, their king, and arranged themselves in their fins in order. Then the Sea King said solemnly,
Our visitor who is sitting before you all is the august grandson of Amaterasu. His name is Hodemi, the fourth Augustness, and he is also called the Happy Hunter of the Mountains. While he was fishing the other day upon the shore of Japan, someone robbed him of his brother's fishing hook. He has come all this way down to the bottom of the sea to our kingdom, because he thought that one of you fishes may have taken the hook from him in mischievous play. If any of you have done so, you must immediately return it. Or if any of you know who the thief is, you must at once tell us his name and where he is now.
All the fishes were taken by surprise when they heard these words, and could say nothing for some time. They sat looking at each other, and at the Dragon King. At last the cuttlefish came forward and said,
I think that the tie,
the red bream,
must be the thief who has stolen the hook. Where's your proof?
asked the king.
Since yesterday evening, the tie has not been able to eat anything, and he seems to be suffering from a bad throat. For this reason, I think the hook may be in his throat. You would better send for him at once.
All the fish agreed to this and said, It is certainly strange that the tie is the only fish who has not obeyed your summons. Will you send for him and inquire into the matter? Then our innocence will be proved.
Yes,
said the Sea King.
it is strange that the tie has not come, for he ought to be the first to be here. Send for him at once.
Without waiting for the king's order, the cuttlefish had already started for the tie's dwelling, and he now returned, bringing the tie with him. He led him before the king. The tie sat there looking frightened and ill. He certainly was in pain, for his usually red face was pale, and his eyes were nearly closed, and looked but half their usual size.
Answer, O tie,
cried the Sea King.
why did you not come in answer to my summons today?
I have been ill since yesterday,
answered the tie.
That is why I could not come.
Don't say another word,
cried out Rin Jin angrily.
Your illness is the punishment of the gods for stealing Mikoto's hook.
It is only too true,
said the tie.
The hook is still in my throat, and all my efforts to get it out have been useless. I can't eat, and I can scarcely breathe, and each moment I feel that it will choke me. And sometimes it gives me great pain. I had no intention of stealing the Mikoto's hook. I heedlessly snapped at the bait which I saw in the water, and the hook came off and stuck in my throat. So I hope you will pardon me.
The cuttlefish now came forward and said to the king,
What I said was right. You see the hook still sticks in the tie's throat. I hope to be able to pull it out in the presence of the Mikoto, and then we can return it to him safely.
Oh, please make haste and pull it out,
cried the tie pitifully. For he felt the pains in his throat coming on again.
I do so want to return the hook to the Mikoto.
All right, Tai-san,
said his friend the cuttlefish, and then opening the tie's mouth as wide as he could, and putting one of his feelers down the tie's throat. He quickly and easily drew the hook out of the sufferer's large mouth. He then washed it and brought it to the king. Rin-jin took the hook from his subject, and then respectfully returned it to Yamasachiko, the Mikoto, or Augustness. The fishes called him, who was overjoyed at getting back his hook. He thanked Rin-jin many times, his face beaming with gratitude, and said that he owed the happy ending of his quest to the Sea King's wise authority and kindness. Rin-jin now desired to punish the tie, but Yamasachiko begged him not to do so. Since his lost hook was thus happily recovered, he did not wish to make more trouble for the poor tie. It was indeed the tie who had taken the hook, but he had already suffered enough for his fault, if fault it could be called. What had been done was done in heedlessness and not by intention. Yamasachiko said he blamed himself. If he had understood how to fish properly, he would never have lost his hook. And therefore all this trouble had been caused in the first place by his trying to do something which he did not know how to do. So he begged the Sea King to forgive his subject. Who could resist the pleading of so wise and compassionate a judge? Rin-jin forgave his subject, at once at the request of his august guest. The tie was so glad that he shook his fins for joy, and he and all the other fish went out from the presence of their king, praising the virtues of Yamasachiko. Now that the hook was found, Yamasachiko had nothing to keep him in Ringu, and he was anxious to get back to his own kingdom, and to make peace with his angry brother, Yumisachiko. But the Sea King, who had learned to love him, and would fain have kept him as a son, begged him not to go so soon, but to make the sea palace his home as long as ever he liked. While Yamasachiko was still hesitating, the two lovely princesses, Teotama and Tamayori, came, and with the sweetest of bows and voices joined with their father in pressing him to stay, so that without seeming ungracious, he could not say them nay, and was obliged to stay on for some time. Between the sea realm and the earth, there was no difference in the night of time. And Yamasachiko found that 3 years went fleeting quickly by in this delightful land. The years pass swiftly when anyone is truly happy. But though the wonders of that enchanted land seemed to be new every day, and though the Sea King's kindness seemed rather to increase than to grow less with time, Yamasachiko grew more and more homesick as the days passed, and he could not repress a great anxiety to know what had happened to his home, and his country, and his brother while he had been away. So at last he went to the Sea King and said,
My stay with you here has been most happy, and I am very grateful to you for all your kindness to me. But I govern Japan, and delightful as this place is, I cannot absent myself forever from my country. I must also return the fishing hook to my brother, and ask his forgiveness for having deprived him of it for so long. I am indeed very sorry to part from you, but this time it cannot be helped. With your gracious permission, I will take my leave today. I hope to make you another visit someday. Please, give up the idea of my staying longer now.
King Rin-jin was overcome with sorrow at the thought that he must lose his friend, who had made a great diversion in the Palace of the Sea, and his tears fell fast as he answered,
We are indeed very sorry to part with you, Makoto, for we have enjoyed your stay with us very much. You have been a noble and honored guest, and we have hardly made you welcome. I quite understand that as you govern Japan, you ought to be there and not here, and that it is vain for us to try and keep you longer with us, much as we would like to have you stay. I hope you will not forget us. Strange circumstances have brought us together, and I trust the friendship thus begun between the land and the sea will last and grow stronger than it has ever been before.
When the Sea King had finished speaking, he turned to his two daughters and bade them bring him the two tide jewels of the sea. The two princesses bowed low, rose, and glided out of the hall. In a few minutes they returned, each one carrying in her hands a flashing gem which filled the room with light. As Yamasakihiko looked at them, he wondered what they could be. The Sea King took them from his daughters and said to his guest,
These two valuable talismans we have inherited from our ancestors from time immemorial. We now give them to you as a parting gift in token of our great affection for you. These two gems are called the Nanju and the Kanju.
Yamasakihiko bowed low to the ground and said,
I can never thank you enough for all your kindness to me. And now will you add one more favor to the rest, and tell me what these jewels are, and what I am to do with them.
The Nanju,
answered the Sea King,
is also called the Jewel of the Flood Tide, and whoever holds it in his possession can command the sea to roll in, and to flood the land at any time that he wills. The Kanju is also called the Jewel of the Ebbing Tide, and this gem controls the sea and the waves thereof, and will cause even a tidal wave to recede.
Then Rin-jin showed his friend how to use the talismans one by one, and handed them to him. Yamasakihiko was very glad to have these two wonderful gems. The Jewel of the Flood Tide and the Jewel of the Ebbing Tide to take back with him, for he felt that they would preserve him in case of danger from enemies at any time. After thanking his kind host again and again, he prepared to depart. The Sea King and the two princesses, Toyotama and Tamayori, and all the inmates of the palace, came out to say goodbye. And before the sound of the last farewell had died away, Yamasachiko passed out from under the gateway, past the well of happy memory standing in the shade of the great Katsura trees on his way to the beach. Here he found, instead of the queer basket on which he had come to the realm of Rin-gu, a large crocodile waiting for him. Never had he seen such a huge creature. It measured 8 fathoms in length, from the tip of its tail to the end of its long mouth. The Sea King had ordered the monster to carry Yamasachi Hiko back to Japan. Like the wonderful basket which Shiwazuki no Okina had made. It could travel faster than any steamboat, and in this strange way, riding on the back of a crocodile, Yamasashi out of the country. When his brother had left him, that day 3 years ago, and had not returned, he had been very glad in his evil heart, and had at once usurped his brother's place as ruler of the land, and had become powerful and rich. Now, in the midst of enjoying what did not belong to him, and hoping that his brother might never return to claim his rights, quite unexpectedly, there stood Yamasachi Hiko before him. Yumisaki Hiko find forgiveness, for he could make no more excuses for sending his brother away again, but in his heart he was very angry and hated his brother more and more, till at last he could no longer bear the sight of him day after day, and planned and watched for an opportunity to kill him. One day, when Yamasaki Hiko was walking in the rice fields, his brother followed him with a dagger. Yamasaki Hiko knew that his brother was following him to kill him, and he felt that now, in this hour of great danger, was the time to use the jewels of the flow and ebb of the tide and prove whether what the Sea King had told him was true or not. So he took out the jewel of the flood tide from the bosom of his dress and raised it to his forehead. Instantly over the fields and over the farms the sea came rolling in wave upon wave, till it reached the spot where his brother was standing. Yumisaki Hiko stood amazed and terrified to see what was happening. In another minute, he was struggling in the water and calling on his brother to save him from drowning. Yamasaki Hiko had a kind heart, and could not bear the sight of his brother's distress. He at once put back the jewel of the flood tide, and took out the jewel of the ebb tide. No sooner did he hold it up, as high as his forehead, than the sea ran back, and ere long, the tossing rolling floods had vanished, and the farms and fields and dry land appeared as before. Yumisaki Hiko was very frightened at the peril of death in which he had stood, and was greatly impressed by the wonderful things he had seen his brother do. He learned now that he was making a fatal mistake to set himself against his brother, younger than he thought he was, for he now had become so powerful that the sea would flow in, and the tide ebb at his word of command. So he humbled himself before Yamasaki Hiko, and asked him to forgive him all the wrong he had done him. Yumisaki Hiko promised to restore his brother to his rights, and also swore that though Yamasaki Hiko was the younger brother, and owed him allegiance by right of birth, that he, Yumisaki Hiko, would exalt him as his superior, and bow before him as Lord of all Japan. Then Yamasaki Hiko said that he would forgive his brother if he would throw into the receding tide all his evil ways. Umisaki Hiko promised, and there was peace between the two brothers. From this time he kept his word, and became a good man and a kind brother. Yamasaki Hiko now ruled his kingdom without being disturbed by family strife, and there was peace in Japan for a long, long time. Above all the treasures in his house, he prized the wonderful jewels of the flow and ebb of the tide which had been given him by Rin-jin, the Dragon King of the Sea. This is the congratulatory ending of Yamasaki Hiko and Yumisachiko. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe my channel for more interesting and beautiful stories, and share our content with your friends.
The Elderbush. Once upon a time there was a little boy who had taken cold. He had gone out and got his feet wet, though nobody could imagine how it had happened, for it was quite dry weather. So his mother undressed him, put him to bed, and had the teapot brought in, to make him a good cup of elderflower tea. Just at that moment the merry old man came in who lived up atop of the house all alone, for he had neither wife nor children, but he liked children very much, and knew so many fairy tales, that it was quite delightful. Now drink your tea, said the boy's mother, then, perhaps, you may hear a fairy tale. If I had but something new to tell, said the old man. But how did the child get his feet wet? That is the very thing that nobody can make out, said his mother. Am I to hear a fairy tale? Asked the little boy. Yes, if you can tell me exactly, for I must know that first, how deep the gutter is in the little street opposite, that you pass through in going to school. Just up to the middle of my boots, said the child, but then I must go into the deep hole. Ah, that's where the wet feet came from, said the old man. I ought now to tell you a story, but I don't know any more. You can make one in a moment, said the little boy. My mother says that all you look at can be turned into a fairy tale, and that you can find a story in everything. Yes, but such tales and stories are good for nothing. The right sort come of themselves. They tap at my forehead and say, here we are. Won't there be a tap soon? Asked the little boy. And his mother laughed, put some elderflowers in the teapot, and poured boiling water upon them. Do tell me something. Pray do. Yes, if a fairy tale would come of its own accord, but they are proud and haughty, and come only when they choose. Stop, said he, all on a sudden. I have it. Pay attention. There is one in the teapot. And the little boy looked at the teapot. The cover rose more and more, and the elderflowers came forth so fresh and white, and shot up long branches. Out of the spout even did they spread themselves on all sides, and grew larger and larger. It was a splendid elderbush, a whole tree, and it reached into the very bed, and pushed the curtains aside. How it bloomed! And what an odor! In the middle of the bush sat a friendly-looking old woman in a most strange dress. It was quite green, like the leaves of the elder, and was trimmed with large white elderflowers, so that at first one could not tell whether it was a stuff, or a natural green and real flowers. What's that woman's name? Asked the little boy. The Greeks and Romans, said the old man, called her a dryad, but that we do not understand. The people who live in the new booths have a much better name for her. They call her Old Granny, and she it is to whom you are to pay attention. Now listen, and look at the beautiful elderbush. Just such another large blooming elder tree stands near the new booths. It grew there in the corner of a little miserable courtyard, and under it sat, of an afternoon, in the most splendid sunshine, two old people, an old seaman, and his old wife. They had great-grandchildren, and were soon to celebrate the 50th anniversary of their marriage. But they could not exactly recollect the date, and old Granny sat in the tree, and looked as pleased as now. I know the date, said she, but those below did not hear her, for they were talking about old times. Yes, can't you remember when we were very little, said the old seaman, and ran and played about? It was the very same courtyard where we now are, and we stuck slips in the ground and made a garden. I remember it well, said the old woman. I remember it quite well. We watered the slips, and one of them was an elderbush. It took root, put forth green shoots, and grew up to be the large tree under which we old folks are now sitting. To be sure, said he. And there in the corner stood a water pail, where I used to swim my boats. True, but first we went to school to learn somewhat, said she, and then we were confirmed. We both cried, but in the afternoon we went up the round tower, and looked down on Copenhagen, and far, far away over the water. Then we went to Frederiksberg, where the king and the queen were sailing about in their splendid barges. But I had a different sort of sailing to that, later, and that too for many a year, a long way off, on great voyages. Yes, many a time have I wept for your sake, said she. I thought you were dead and gone, and lying down in the deep waters. Many a night have I got up to see if the wind had not changed, and changed it had, sure enough, but you never came. I remember so well one day, when the rain was pouring down in torrents, the scavengers were before the house where I was in service. And I had come up with the dust, and remained standing at the door. It was dreadful weather, when just as I was there, the postman came and gave me a letter. It was from you. What a tour that letter had made! I opened it instantly and read. I laughed and wept. I was so happy. In it I read that you were in warm lands where the coffee tree grows. What a blessed land that must be! You related so much, and I saw it all the while the rain was pouring down, and I standing there with the dust box. At the same moment came someone who embraced me. Yes, but you gave him a good box on his ear that made it tingle, but I did not know it was you. You arrived as soon as your letter, and you were so handsome, that you still are, and had a long yellow silk handkerchief round your neck, and a brand new hat on. Oh, you were so dashing! Good heavens! What weather it was, and what a state the street was in, and then we married, said he. Don't you remember? And then we had our first little boy, and then Mary, and Nicholas, and Peter, and Christian. Yes, and how they all grew up to be honest people, and were beloved by everybody. And their children also have children, said the old sailor. Yes, those are our grandchildren, full of strength and vigor. It was, methinks, about this season that we had our wedding. Yes, this very day is the 50th anniversary of the marriage, said old Granny, sticking her head between the two old people, who thought it was their neighbor who nodded to them. They looked at each other, and held one another by the hand. Soon after came their children, and their grandchildren. For they knew well enough that it was the day of the 50th anniversary, and had come with their gratulations that very morning. But the old people had forgotten it, although they were able to remember all that had happened many years ago. And the elderbush sent forth a strong odor in the sun that was just about to set, and shone right in the old people's faces. They both looked so rosy-cheeked, and the youngest of the grandchildren danced around them, and called out quite delighted that there was to be something very splendid that evening. They were all to have hot potatoes, and old Nanny nodded in the bush, and shouted hurrah with the rest. But that is no fairy tale, said the little boy, who was listening to the story. The thing is, you must understand it, said the narrator. Let us ask old Nanny. That was no fairy tale, 'tis true, said old Nanny, but now it's coming. The most wonderful fairy tales grow out of that which is reality. Were that not the case, you know, my magnificent elderbush could not have grown out of the teapot. And then she took the little boy out of bed, laid him on her bosom, and the branches of the elder tree, full of flowers, closed around her. They sat in an aerial dwelling, and it flew with them through the air. Oh, it was wondrous beautiful. Old Nanny had grown all of a sudden a young and pretty maiden. But her robe was still the same green stuff with white flowers, which she had worn before. On her bosom she had a real elderflower, and in her yellow waving hair a wreath of the flowers. Her eyes were so large and blue that it was a pleasure to look at them. She kissed the boy, and now they were of the same age and felt alike. Hand in hand they went out of the bower, and they were standing in the beautiful garden of their home. Near the green lawn Papa's walking stick was tied, and for the little ones it seemed to be endowed with life. For as soon as they got astride it, the round polished knob was turned into a magnificent neighing head, a long black mane fluttered in the breeze, and four slender yet strong legs shot out. The animal was strong and handsome, and away they went at full gallop round the lawn. Huzzah! Now we are riding miles off, said the boy. We are riding away to the castle where we were last year. And on they rode round the grass plot, and the little maiden, who we know was no one else but old Nanny, kept on crying out, Now we are in the country. Don't you see the farmhouse yonder? And there is an elder tree standing beside it, and the cock is scraping away the earth for the hens. Look how he struts. And now we are close to the church. It lies high upon the hill, between the large oak trees, one of which is half decayed. And now we are by the smithy, where the fire is blazing, and where the half-naked men are banging with their hammers till the sparks fly about. Away, away, to the beautiful country seat. And all that the little maiden, who sat behind on the stick, spoke of, flew by in reality. The boy saw it all, and yet they were only going round the grass plot. Then they played in a side avenue, and marked out a little garden on the earth, and they took elder blossoms from their hair, planted them, and they grew just like those the old people planted when they were children, as related before. They went hand in hand, as the old people had done when they were children, but not to the Round Tower, or to Fredericksburg. No, the little damsel wound her arms round the boy, and then they flew far away through all Denmark. And spring came, and summer, and then it was autumn, and then winter, and 1,000 pictures were reflected in the eye and in the heart of the boy. And the little girl always sang to him, This you will never forget. And during their whole flight the elder tree smelled so sweet and odorous. He remarked the roses and the fresh beeches, but the elder tree had a more wondrous fragrance, for its flowers hung on the breast of the little maiden, and there, too, did he often lay his head during the flight. It is lovely here in spring, said the young maiden, and they stood in a beechwood that had just put on its first green, where the woodroof at their feet sent forth its fragrance, and the pale red anemone looked so pretty among the verdure. Oh, would it were always spring in the sweetly smelling Danish beech forests. It is lovely here in summer, said she, and she flew past old castles of bygone days of chivalry, where the red walls and the embattled gables were mirrored in the canal, where the swans were swimming and peered up into the old cool avenues. In the fields the corn was waving like the sea. In the ditches red and yellow flowers were growing, while wild drone flowers and blooming convolvuluses were creeping in the hedges. And towards evening the moon rose round and large, and the haycocks in the meadows smelt so sweetly. This one never forgets. "It is lovely here in autumn," said the little maiden, and suddenly the atmosphere grew as blue again as before. The forest grew red and green and yellow-colored. The dogs came leaping along, and whole flocks of wildfowl flew over the cairn, where blackberry bushes were hanging round the old stones. The sea was dark blue, covered with ships full of white sails, and in the barn old women, maidens, and children were sitting picking hops into a large cask. The young sang songs, but the old told fairy tales of mountain sprites and soothsayers. Nothing could be more charming. "It is delightful here in winter," said the little maiden, and all the trees were covered with hoarfrost. They looked like white corals. The snow crackled underfoot, as if one had new boots on, and one falling star after the other was seen in the sky. The Christmas tree was lighted in the room, presents were there, and good humor reigned. In the country the violins sounded in the room of the peasant. The newly baked cakes were attacked, even the poorest child said, "It is really delightful here in winter." Yes, it was delightful, and the little maiden showed the boy everything, and the elder tree still was fragrant, and the red flag, with the white cross, was still waving, the flag under which the old seamen in the new booths had sailed. And the boy grew up to be a lad, and was to go forth in the wide world far, far away to warm lands, where the coffee tree grows. But at his departure the little maiden took an elder blossom from her bosom, and gave it him to keep, and it was placed between the leaves of his prayer book. And when in foreign lands he opened the book, it was always at the place where the keepsake flower lay, and the more he looked at it, the fresher it became. He felt, as it were, the fragrance of the Danish groves, and from among the leaves of the flowers he could distinctly see the little maiden, peeping forth with her bright blue eyes. And then she whispered, "It is delightful here in spring, summer, autumn, and winter," and 100 visions glided before his mind. Thus passed many years, and he was now an old man, and sat with his old wife under the blooming tree. They held each other by the hand, as the old grandfather and grandmother yonder in the new booths did, and they talked exactly like them of old times, and of the 50th anniversary of their wedding. The little maiden, with the blue eyes, and with elder blossoms in her hair, sat in the tree, nodded to both of them, and said, "Today is the 50th anniversary." And then she took 2 flowers out of her hair, and kissed them. First they shone like silver, then like gold. And when they laid them on the heads of the old people, each flower became a golden crown. So there they both sat, like a king and a queen, under the fragrant tree, that looked exactly like an elder. The old man told his wife the story of old Nanny, as it had been told him when a boy. And it seemed to both of them it contained much that resembled their own history, and those parts that were like it pleased them best. "Thus it is," said the little maiden in the tree, "some call me old Nanny, others a dryad, but in reality my name is Remembrance, 'tis I who sit in the tree that grows and grows. I can remember, I can tell things. Let me see if you have my flower still. And the old man opened his prayer book. There lay the elder blossom, as fresh as if it had been placed there but a short time before. And remembrance nodded, and the old people, decked with crowns of gold, sat in the flush of the evening sun. They closed their eyes and yes, that's the end of the story. The little boy lay in his bed. He did not know if he had dreamed or not, or if he had been listening while someone told him the story. The teapot was standing on the table, but no elder tree was growing out of it, and the old man, who had been talking, was just on the point of going out at the door, and he did go. How splendid that was, said the little boy. Mother, I have been to warm countries. So I should think, said his mother. When one has drunk 2 good cupfuls of elderflower tea, 'tis likely enough one goes into warm climates. And she tucked him up nicely, lest he should take cold. You have had a good sleep while I have been sitting here, and arguing with him whether it was a story or a fairy tale. And where is old Nanny? Asked the little boy. In the teapot, said his mother, and there she may remain. Thank you for watching.
The Fisherman and His Wife. There was once a fisherman who lived with his wife in a pigsty, close by the seaside. The fisherman used to go out all day long a-fishing, and one day, as he sat on the shore with his rod, looking at the sparkling waves and watching his line, all on a sudden his float was dragged away deep into the water, and in drawing it up he pulled out a great fish. But the fish said, "Pray let me live. I am not a real fish, I am an enchanted prince. Put me in the water again, and let me go." "Oh, ho," said the man. "You need not make so many words about the matter. I will have nothing to do with a fish that can talk, so swim away, sir, as soon as you please." Then he put him back into the water, and the fish darted straight down to the bottom, and left a long streak of blood behind him on the wave. When the fisherman went home to his wife in the pigsty, he told her how he had caught a great fish, and how it had told him it was an enchanted prince, and how, on hearing it speak, he had let it go again. "Did not you ask it for anything?" said the wife. "We live very wretchedly here, in this nasty dirty pigsty. Do go back and tell the fish we want a snug little cottage." The fisherman did not much like the business. However, he went to the seashore, and when he came back there the water looked all yellow and green. And he stood at the water's edge, and said, "O man of the sea, hearken to me, my wife Ilsebil will have her own wool, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." Then the fish came swimming to him, and said, "Well, what is her will? What does your wife want?" "Ah," said the fisherman, "she says that when I had caught you, I ought to have asked you for something before I let you go. She does not like living any longer in the pigsty, and wants a snug little cottage." "Go home, then," said the fish, "she is in the cottage already." So the man went home, and saw his wife standing at the door of a nice trim little cottage. Come in," said she. "Is not this much better than the filthy pigsty we had?" And there was a parlour, and a bedchamber, and a kitchen, and behind the cottage there was a little garden, planted with all sorts of flowers and fruits. And there was a courtyard behind, full of ducks and chickens. "Ah," said the fisherman, "how happily we shall live now." "We will try to do so, at least," said his wife. Everything went right for a week or two, and then Dame Ilsebil said, "Husband, there is not near room enough for us in this cottage. The courtyard and the garden are a great deal too small. I should like to have a large stone castle to live in. Go to the fish again and tell him to give us a castle." "Wife," said the fisherman, "I don't like to go to him again, for perhaps he will be angry. We ought to be easy with this pretty cottage to live in." "Nonsense," said the wife. "He will do it very willingly. I know. Go along and try." The fisherman went, but his heart was very heavy, and when he came to the sea, it looked blue and gloomy, though it was very calm, and he went close to the edge of the waves, and said, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "Well, what does she want now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the man, dolefully, "my wife wants to live in a stone castle." "Go home then," said the fish. "She is standing at the gate of it already." So away went the fisherman, and found his wife standing before the gate of a great castle. "See," said she, "is not this grand?" With that they went into the castle together, and found a great many servants there, and the rooms all richly furnished, and full of golden chairs and tables, and behind the castle was a garden, and around it was a park half a mile long, full of sheep and goats and hares and deer, and in the courtyard were stables and cowhouses. "Well," said the man, Now we will live cheerful and happy in this beautiful castle for the rest of our lives." "Perhaps we may," said the wife, "but let us sleep upon it before we make up our minds to that." So they went to bed. The next morning, when Dame Ilsebil awoke, it was broad daylight, and she jogged the fisherman with her elbow, and said, "Get up, husband, and bestir yourself, for we must be king of all the land." "Wife," said the man, "why should we wish to be the king?" "I will not be king, then I will," said she. "But wife," said the fisherman, "how can you be king? The fish cannot make you a king." "Husband," said she, "say no more about it, but go and try. I will be king." So the man went away quite sorrowful to think that his wife should want to be king. This time the sea looked a dark grey colour, and was overspread with curling waves and the ridges of foam as he cried out, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." "Well, what would she have now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the poor man, "my wife wants to be king." "Go home," said the fish, "she is king already." Then the fisherman went home, and as he came close to the palace he saw a troop of soldiers, and heard the sound of drums and trumpets. And when he went in he saw his wife sitting on a throne of gold and diamonds, with a golden crown upon her head, and on each side of her stood 6 fair maidens, each a head taller than the other. "Well, wife," said the fisherman, "are you king?" "Yes," said she, "I am king." And when he had looked at her for a long time, he said, "O wife, what a fine thing it is to be king. Now we shall never have anything more to wish for as long as we live." "I don't know how that may be," said she, "never is a long time. I am king, it is true, but I begin to be tired of that, and I think I should like to be emperor." "Alas, wife, why should you wish to be emperor?" said the fisherman. "Husband," said she, "go to the fish. I say I will be emperor." "A wife," replied the fisherman. "The fish cannot make an emperor, I am sure, and I should not like to ask him for such a thing." "I am king," said Ilsebil, "and you are my slave, so go at once." So the fisherman was forced to go, and he muttered as he went along, "This will come to no good. It is too much to ask. The fish will be tired at last, and then we shall be sorry for what we have done." He soon came to the seashore, and the water was quite black and muddy, and a mighty whirlwind blew over the waves and rolled them about. But he went as near as he could to the water's brink, and said, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and has sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What would she have now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the fisherman, "she wants to be emperor." "Go home," said the fish, "she is emperor already." So he went home again, and as he came near he saw his wife Ilsebil sitting on a very lofty throne made of solid gold, with a great crown, her head full 2 yards high, and on each side of her stood her guards and attendants in a row, each one smaller than the other, from the tallest giant down to a little dwarf no bigger than my finger. And before her stood princes, and dukes, and earls, and the fisherman went up to her and said, "Wife, are you emperor?" "Yes," said she, "I am emperor." "Ah," said the man, as he gazed upon her, "what a fine thing it is to be emperor." "Husband," said she, "why should we stop at being emperor? I will be pope next." "Oh wife, wife," said he, "how can you be pope? There is but one pope at a time in Christendom." "Husband," said she, "I will be pope this very day." "But," replied the husband, "the fish cannot make you pope." "What nonsense," said she, "if he can make an emperor, he can make a pope. Go and try him." So the fisherman went. But when he came to the shore, the wind was raging and the sea was tossed up and down in boiling waves, and the ships were in trouble, and rolled fearfully upon the tops of the billows. In the middle of the heavens there was a little piece of blue sky, but towards the south all was red, as if a dreadful storm was rising. At this sight the fisherman was dreadfully frightened, and he trembled so that his knees knocked together, but still he went down near to the shore, and said, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsebil will have her own will, and has sent me to beg a boon of thee." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Ah," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be pope." "Go home," said the fish, "she is pope already." Then the fisherman went home, and found Ilsebil sitting on a throne that was 2 miles high, and she had 3 great crowns on her head, and around her stood all the pomp and power of the church. And on each side of her were 2 rows of burning lights, of all sizes, the greatest as large as the highest and biggest tower in the world, and the least no larger than a small rushlight. "Wife," said the fisherman, as he looked at all this greatness, "are you pope?" "Yes," said she, "I am pope." "Well, wife," replied he, "it is a grand thing to be pope, and now you must be easy, for you can be nothing greater." "I will think about that," said the wife. Then they went to bed, but Dame Ilsebil could not sleep all night for thinking what she should be next. At last, as she was dropping asleep, morning broke, and the sun rose. "Ha!" thought she, as she woke up and looked at it through the window. "After all, I cannot prevent the sun rising." At this thought she was very angry, and wakened her husband, and said, "Husband, Go to the fish and tell him I must be lord of the sun and moon. The fisherman was half asleep, but the thought frightened him so much that he started and fell out of bed. Alas, wife, said he, cannot you be easy with being pope? No, said she, I am very uneasy as long as the sun and moon rise without my leave. Go to the fish at once. Then the man went shivering with fear, and as he was going down to the shore a dreadful storm arose, so that the trees and the very rocks shook. And all the heavens became black with stormy clouds, and the lightnings played, and the thunders rolled, and you might have seen in the sea great black waves, swelling up like mountains with crowns of white foam upon their heads. And the fisherman crept towards the sea, and cried out as well as he could, O man of the sea, hearken to me, my wife Ilsebil will have her own wool, and has sent me to beg a boon of thee. What does she want now? Said the fish. Ah, said he, she wants to be lord of the sun and moon. Go home, said the fish, to your pigsty again, and there they live to this very day.
The Old Man and His Wonderful Dog. Long, long ago there lived an old man and his wife who supported themselves by cultivating a small plot of land. Their life had been a very happy and peaceful one save for one great sorrow. And this was they had no child. Their only pet was a dog named Shiro, and on him they lavished all the affection of their old age. Indeed, they loved him so much that whenever they had anything nice to eat they denied themselves to give it to Shiro. Now Shiro means white, and he was so called because of his color. He was a real Japanese dog, and very like a small wolf in appearance. The happiest hour of the day both for the old man and his dog was when the man returned from his work in the field, and having finished his frugal supper of rice and vegetables, would take what he had saved from the meal out to the little veranda that ran round the cottage. Sure enough, Shiro was waiting for his master and the evening tidbit. Then the old man said, "Chin, chin," and Shiro sat up and begged, and his master gave him the food. Next door to this good old couple there lived another old man and his wife who were both wicked and cruel, and who hated their good neighbors and the dog Shiro with all their might. Whenever Shiro happened to look into their kitchen they at once kicked him or threw something at him, sometimes even wounding him. One day Shiro was heard barking for a long time in the field at the back of his master's house. The old man, thinking that perhaps some birds were attacking the corn, hurried out to see what was the matter. As soon as Shiro saw his master he ran to meet him, wagging his tail, and seizing the end of his kimono, dragged him under a large tree. Here he began to dig very industriously with his paws, yelping with joy all the time. The old man, unable to understand what it all meant, stood looking on in bewilderment. But Shiro went on barking and digging with all his might. The thought that something might be hidden beneath the tree, and that the dog had scented it, at last struck the old man. He ran back to the house, fetched his spade, and began to dig the ground at that spot. What was his astonishment when, after digging for some time, he came upon a heap of old and valuable coins, and the deeper he dug, the more gold coins did he find. So intent was the old man on his work that he never saw the cross face of his neighbor peering at him through the bamboo hedge. At last all the gold coins lay shining on the ground. Shiro sat by erect with pride, and looking fondly at his master as if to say, "You see, though only a dog, I can make some return for all the kindness you show me." The old man ran in to call his wife, and together they carried home the treasure. Thus in one day the poor old man became rich. His gratitude to the faithful dog knew no bounds, and he loved and petted him more than ever, if that were possible. The cross old neighbor, attracted by Shiro's barking, had been an unseen and envious witness of the finding of the treasure. He began to think that he, too, would like to find a fortune. So a few days later he called at the old man's house, and very ceremoniously asked permission to borrow Shiro for a short time. Shiro's master thought this a strange request, because he knew quite well that not only did his neighbor not love his pet dog, but that he never lost an opportunity of striking and tormenting him whenever the dog crossed his path. But the good old man was too kind-hearted to refuse his neighbor, so he consented to lend the dog on condition that he should be taken great care of. The wicked old man returned to his home, with an evil smile on his face, and told his wife how he had succeeded in his crafty intentions. He then took his spade and hastened to his own field, forcing the unwilling Shiro to follow him. As soon as he reached a tree, he said to the dog threateningly, "If there were gold coins under your master's tree, there must also be gold coins under my tree. You must find them for me. Where are they? Where? Where?" And catching hold of Shiro's neck, he held the dog's head to the ground, so that Shiro began to scratch and dig in order to free himself from the horrid old man's grasp. The old man was very pleased when he saw the dog begin to scratch and dig, for he at once supposed that some gold coins lay buried under his tree as well as under his neighbor's, and that the dog had scented them as before. So pushing Shiro away, he began to dig himself, but there was nothing to be found. As he went on digging, a foul smell was noticeable, and he at last came upon a refuse heap. The old man's disgust can be imagined. This soon gave way to anger. He had seen his neighbor's good fortune, and hoping for the same luck himself, he had borrowed the dog Shiro. And now, just as he seemed on the point of finding what he sought, only a horrid-smelling refuse heap had rewarded him for a morning's digging. Instead of blaming his own greed for his disappointment, he blamed the poor dog. He seized his spade, and with all his strength struck Shiro, and killed him on the spot. He then threw the dog's body into the hole which he had dug in the hope of finding a treasure of gold coins, and covered it over with the earth. Then he returned to the house, telling no one, not even his wife, what he had done. After waiting several days, as the dog Shiro did not return, his master began to grow anxious. Day after day went by, and the good old man waited in vain. Then he went to his neighbor, and asked him to give him back his dog. Without any shame or hesitation, the wicked neighbor answered that he had killed Shiro because of his bad behavior. At this dreadful news, Shiro's master wept many sad and bitter tears. Great indeed was his woeful surprise, but he was too good and gentle to reproach his bad neighbor. Learning that Shiro was buried under a tree in the field, he asked the old man to give him the tree, in remembrance of his poor dog Shiro. Even the cross old neighbor could not refuse such a simple request, so he consented to give the old man the tree under which Shiro lay buried. Shiro's master then cut the tree down and carried it home. Out of the trunk he made a mortar. In this his wife put some rice, and he began to pound it with the intention of making a festival to the memory of his dog Shiro. A strange thing happened. His wife put the rice into the mortar, and no sooner had he begun to pound it to make the cakes than it began to increase in quantity gradually till it was about 5 times the original amount, and the cakes were turned out of the mortar, as if an invisible hand were at work. When the old man and his wife saw this, they understood that it was a reward to them from Shiro, for their faithful love to him. They tasted the cakes, and found them nicer than any other food. So from this time they never troubled about food, for they lived upon the cakes, with which the mortar never ceased to supply them. The greedy neighbor, hearing of this new piece of good luck, was filled with envy as before, and called on the old man and asked leave to borrow the wonderful mortar for a short time, pretending that he too sorrowed for the death of Shiro, and wished to make cakes for a festival to the dog's memory. The old man did not in the least wish to lend it to his cruel neighbor, but he was too kind to refuse. So the envious man carried home the mortar, but he never brought it back. Several days passed, and Shiro's master waited in vain for the mortar. So he went to call on the borrower, and asked him to be good enough to return the mortar if he had finished with it. He found him sitting by a big fire made of pieces of wood. On the ground lay what looked very much like pieces of a broken mortar. In answer to the old man's inquiry, the wicked neighbor answered haughtily, "Have you come to ask me for your mortar? I broke it to pieces, and now I am making a fire of the wood. For when I tried to pound cakes in it, only some horrid smelling stuff came out." The good old man said, "I am very sorry for that. It is a great pity you did not ask me for the cakes if you wanted them. I would have given you as many as ever you wanted. Now please give me the ashes of the mortar, as I wish to keep them in remembrance of my dog." The neighbor consented at once, and the old man carried home a basket full of ashes. Not long after this, the old man accidentally scattered some of the ashes made by the burning of the mortar on the trees of his garden. A wonderful thing happened. It was late in autumn, and all the trees had shed their leaves. But no sooner did the ashes touch their branches than the cherry trees, the plum trees, and all other blossoming shrubs burst into bloom, so that the old man's garden was suddenly transformed into a beautiful picture of spring. The old man's delight knew no bounds, and he carefully preserved the remaining ashes. The story of the old man's garden spread far and wide, and people from far and near came to see the wonderful sight. One day, soon after this, the old man heard someone knocking at his door, and going to the porch to see who it was, he was surprised to see a knight standing there. This knight told him that he was a retainer of a great daimyo, that one of the favorite cherry trees in this nobleman's garden had withered, and that though every one in his service had tried all manner of means to revive it, none took effect. The knight was sore perplexed when he saw what great displeasure the loss of his favorite cherry tree caused the daimyo. At this point, fortunately, they had heard that there was a wonderful old man who could make withered trees to blossom, and that his lord had sent him to ask the old man to come to him. And, added the knight, I shall be very much obliged if you will come at once. The good old man was greatly surprised at what he heard, but respectfully followed the knight to the nobleman's palace. The daimyo, who had been impatiently awaiting the old man's coming, as soon as he saw him, asked him at once, Are you the old man who can make withered trees flower even out of season? The old man made an obeisance, and replied, I am that old man. Then the daimyo said, You must make that dead cherry tree in my garden blossom again, by means of your famous ashes. I shall look on. Then they all went into the garden, the daimyo and his retainers and the ladies in waiting, who carried the daimyo's sword. The old man now tucked up his kimono, and made ready to climb the tree, saying, Excuse me, he took the pot of ashes which he had brought with him, and began to climb the tree. Every one watching his movements with great interest. At last he climbed to the spot where the tree divided into two great branches, and taking up his position here, the old man sat down, and scattered the ashes right and left all over the branches and twigs. Wonderful, indeed, was the result. The withered tree at once burst into full bloom. The daimyo was so transported with joy that he looked as if he would go mad. He rose to his feet and spread out his fan, calling the old man down from the tree. He himself gave the old man a wine cup filled with the best sake, and rewarded him with much silver and gold and many other precious things. The daimyo ordered that, henceforth, the old man should call himself by the name of Hanasakajiji, or the old man who makes the trees to blossom, and that henceforth all were to recognize him by this name. And he sent him home with great honor. The wicked neighbor, as before, heard of the good old man's fortune, and of all that had so auspiciously befallen him. And he could not suppress all the envy and jealousy that filled his heart. He called to mind how he had failed in his attempt to find the gold coins, and then in making the magic cakes. This time surely he must succeed if he imitated the old man, who made withered trees to flower simply by sprinkling ashes on them. This would be the simplest task of all. So he set to work, and gathered together all the ashes which remained in the fireplace from the burning of the wonderful mortar. Then he set out in the hope of finding some great man to employ him, calling out loudly as he went along, "Here comes the wonderful man, who can make withered trees blossom. Here comes the old man who can make dead trees blossom." The daimyo in his palace heard this cry, and said, "That must be the Hanasakijiji passing. I have nothing to do today. Let him try his art again. It will amuse me to look on." So the retainers went out, and brought in the impostor before their lord. The satisfaction of false old man can now be imagined. But the daimyo looking at him thought it strange that he was not at all like the old man he had seen before. So he asked him, "Are you the man whom I named Hanasakijiji?" And the envious neighbor answered with a lie, "Yes, my lord." That is strange, said the daimyo. I thought there was only one Hanasakijiji in the world. Has he now some disciples? I am the true Hanasakijiji. The one who came to you before was only my disciple, replied the old man again. Then you must be more skillful than the other. Try what you can do and let me see. The envious neighbor, with the daimyo and his court following, then went into the garden, and approaching a dead tree, took out a handful of the ashes which he carried with him, and scattered them over the tree. But not only did the tree not burst into flower, but not even a bud came forth. Thinking that he had not used enough ashes, the old man took handfuls, and again sprinkled them over the withered tree. But all to no effect. After trying several times, the ashes were blown into the daimyo's eyes. This made him very angry, and he ordered his retainers to arrest the false Hanasakijiji at once, and put him in prison for an impostor. From this imprisonment the wicked old man was never freed. Thus did he meet with punishment at last for all his evil doings. The good old man, however, with the treasure of gold coins which Shiro had found for him, and with all the gold and the silver which the daimyo had showered on him, became a rich and prosperous man in his old age, and lived a long and happy life, beloved and respected by all.
The Wolf and the House Dog. A wolf met a dog, and seeing that he looked fat and sleek, said to him, "How does it happen, my friend, that you are so plump, while I, although I run after game, day and night, am half starved?" "Why," said the dog, "I do not have to run after my food. I only guard the house at night, and all the family pet me and feed me with scraps from their own plates. Come and live with me, and you shall be as well off as I am." "That I should like," said the wolf. "I will at least go with you, and try the life." As they trotted along the road together, the wolf saw a mark on the dog's neck and asked him what it was. "Oh, that is nothing," said the dog, "only a little mark made by the fretting of my chain." "Do you wear a chain?" asked the wolf. "And do you mean to say that you are tied up?" "Why, yes," said the dog. "They tie me in the daytime, but at night I can go where I please. It is a bit annoying at first, but one soon gets used to it." "Goodbye, my friend," said the wolf. "That is enough for me. Though I may not be fat, I will at least be free." Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe my channel for more interesting and beautiful stories, and share our content with your friends.
Welcome to Read and Speak English Adventures. Let's start.
The Little Mermaid. Far out in the ocean, where the water is as blue as the prettiest cornflower and as clear as crystal, it is very, very deep, so deep, indeed, that no cable could sound it. And many church steeples, piled one upon another, would not reach from the ground beneath to the surface of the water above. There dwelled the Sea King and his subjects. We must not imagine that there is nothing at the bottom of the sea but bare yellow sand. No, indeed, for on this sand grow the strangest flowers and plants, the leaves and stems of which are so pliant that the slightest agitation of the water causes them to stir as if they had life. Fishes, both large and small, glide between the branches as birds fly among the trees here upon land. In the deepest spot of all stands the castle of the Sea King. Its walls are built of coral, and the long Gothic windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is formed of shells that open and close as the water flows over them. Their appearance is very beautiful, for in each lies a glittering pearl which would be fit for the diadem of a queen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, and his aged mother kept house for him. She was a very sensible woman, but exceedingly proud of her high birth, and on that account wore 12 oysters on her tail, while others of high rank were only allowed to wear 6. She was, however, deserving of very great praise, especially for her care of the little sea princesses, her 6 granddaughters. They were beautiful children, but the youngest was the prettiest of them all. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea, but like all the others, she had no feet and her body ended in a fish's tail. All day long they played in the great halls of the castle, or among the living flowers that grew out of the walls. The large amber windows were open, and the fish swam in, just as the swallows fly into our houses when we open the windows. Only the fishes swam up to the princesses, ate out of their hands, and allowed themselves to be stroked. Outside the castle there was a beautiful garden, in which grew bright red and dark blue flowers, and blossoms like flames of fire. The fruit glittered like gold, and the leaves and stems waved to and fro continually. The earth itself was the finest sand, but blue as the flame of burning sulfur. Over everything lay a peculiar blue radiance, as if the blue sky were everywhere, above and below, instead of the dark depths of the sea. In calm weather the sun could be seen, looking like a reddish-purple flower with light streaming from the calyx. Each of the young princesses had a little plot of ground in the garden, where she might dig and plant as she pleased. One arranged her flower bed in the form of a whale. Another preferred to make hers like the figure of a little mermaid, while the youngest child made hers round, like the sun, and in it grew flowers as red as his rays at sunset. She was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful. While her sisters showed delight at the wonderful things which they obtained from the wrecks of vessels, she cared only for her pretty flowers. Red like the sun, and a beautiful marble statue. It was the representation of a handsome boy, carved out of pure white stone, which had fallen to the bottom of the sea from a wreck. She planted by the statue a rose-colored weeping willow. It grew rapidly and soon hung its fresh branches over the statue, almost down to the blue sands. The shadows had the color of violet and waved to and fro like the branches, so that it seemed as if the crown of the tree and the root were at play, trying to kiss each other. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She made her old grandmother tell her all she knew of the ships and of the towns, the people and the animals. To her it seemed most wonderful and beautiful to hear that the flowers of the land had fragrance, while those below the sea had none, that the trees of the forest were green, and that the fishes among the trees could sing so sweetly that it was a pleasure to listen to them. Her grandmother called the birds fishes, or the little mermaid would not have understood what was meant, for she had never seen birds. "When you have reached your 15th year," said the grandmother, "you will have permission to rise up out of the sea and sit on the rocks in the moonlight, while the great ships go sailing by. Then you will see both forests and towns." In the following year, one of the sisters would be 15. But as each was a year younger than the other, the youngest would have to wait 5 years before her turn came to rise up from the bottom of the ocean to see the earth as we do. However, each promised to tell the others what she saw on her first visit and what she thought was most beautiful. Their grandmother could not tell them enough. There were so many things about which they wanted to know. None of them longed so much for her turn to come as the youngest, she who had the longest time to wait, and who was so quiet and thoughtful. Many nights she stood by the open window, looking up through the dark blue water and watching the fish as they splashed about with their fins and tails. She could see the moon and stars shining faintly, but through the water they looked larger than they do to our eyes. When something like a black cloud passed between her and them, she knew that it was either a whale swimming over her head, or a ship full of human beings who never imagined that a pretty little mermaid was standing beneath them, holding out her white hands towards the keel of their ship. At length the eldest was 15 and was allowed to rise to the surface of the ocean. When she returned she had hundreds of things to talk about. But the finest thing, she said, was to lie on a sand bank in the quiet moonlit sea, near the shore, gazing at the lights of the nearby town, that twinkled like hundreds of stars, and listening to the sounds of music, the noise of carriages, the voices of human beings, and the merry pealing of the bells in the church steeples. Because she could not go near all these wonderful things, she longed for them all the more. Oh, how eagerly did the youngest sister listen to all these descriptions. And afterwards, when she stood at the open window looking up through the dark blue water, she thought of the great city, with all its bustle and noise, and even fancied she could hear the sound of the church bells down in the depths of the sea. In another year, the second sister received permission to rise to the surface of the water and to swim about where she pleased. She rose just as the sun was setting, and this, she said, was the most beautiful sight of all. The whole sky looked like gold, and violet and rose-colored clouds, which she could not describe, drifted across it. And more swiftly than the clouds, flew a large flock of wild swans toward the setting sun, like a long white veil across the sea. She also swam towards the sun, but it sank into the waves, and the rosy tints faded from the clouds and from the sea. The third sister's turn followed, and she was the boldest of them all, for she swam up a broad river that emptied into the sea. On the banks she saw green hills covered with beautiful vines, and palaces and castles peeping out from amid the proud trees of the forest. She heard birds singing and felt the rays of the sun so strongly that she was obliged often to dive under the water to cool her burning face. In a narrow creek she found a large group of little human children, almost naked, sporting about in the water. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a great fright. And then a little black animal. It was a dog, but she did not know it, for she had never seen one before. Came to the water and barked at her so furiously that she became frightened and rushed back to the open sea. But she said she should never forget the beautiful forest, the green hills, and the pretty children who could swim in the water although they had no tails. The fourth sister was more timid. She remained in the midst of the sea, but said it was quite as beautiful there as nearer the land. She could see many miles around her, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen the ships, but at such a great distance that they looked like seagulls. The dolphins sported in the waves, and the great whales spouted water from their nostrils till it seemed as if 100 fountains were playing in every direction. The fifth sister's birthday occurred in the winter, so when her turn came she saw what the others had not seen the first time they went up. The sea looked quite green, and large icebergs were floating about, each like a pearl, she said, but larger and loftier than the churches built by men. They were of the most singular shapes and glittered like diamonds. She had seated herself on one of the largest, and let the wind play with her long hair. She noticed that all the ships sailed past very rapidly, steering as far away as they could, as if they were afraid of the iceberg. Towards evening, as the sun went down, dark clouds covered the sky, the thunder rolled, and the flashes of lightning glowed red on the icebergs as they were tossed about by the heaving sea. On all the ships the sails were reefed with fear and trembling, while she sat on the floating iceberg, calmly watching the lightning as it darted its forked flashes into the sea. Each of the sisters, when first she had permission to rise to the surface, was delighted with the new and beautiful sights. Now that they were grown-up girls and could go when they pleased, they had become quite indifferent about it. They soon wished themselves back again. And after a month had passed, they said it was much more beautiful down below and pleasanter to be at home. Yet often, in the evening hours, the 5 sisters would twine their arms about each other and rise to the surface together. Their voices were more charming than that of any human being. And before the approach of a storm, when they feared that a ship might be lost, they swam before the vessel, singing enchanting songs of the delights to be found in the depths of the sea, and begging the voyagers not to fear if they sank to the bottom. But the sailors could not understand the song, and thought it was the sighing of the storm. These things were never beautiful to them. For if the ship sank, the men would drown and their dead bodies alone reached the palace of the Sea King. When the sisters rose, arm in arm, through the water, their youngest sister would stand quite alone, looking after them, ready to cry. Only, since mermaids have no tears, she suffered more acutely. "Oh, were I but 15 years old," said she, "I know that I shall love the world up there, and all the people who live in it." At last she reached her 15th year. Well, now you are grown up, said the old dowager, her grandmother. Come and let me adorn you like your sisters. And she placed in her hair a wreath of white lilies, of which every flower leaf was half a pearl. Then the old lady ordered 8 great oysters to attach themselves to the tail of the princess to show her high rank. But they hurt me so, said the little mermaid. Yes, I know. Pride must suffer pain, replied the old lady. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all this grandeur, and laid aside the heavy wreath. The red flowers in her own garden would have suited her much better. But she could not change herself, so she said farewell and rose as lightly as a bubble to the surface of the water. The sun had just set when she raised her head above the waves. The clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. The sea was calm, and the air mild and fresh. A large ship with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water. Only one sail was set, for not a breeze stirred.